I have a 90-second spiel.
Oh,
and
great.
then I'll tell you about the context of my my 20-minute one.
All right.
But the 90-second one, we don't have elevators in my town, actually. So it's not an elevator. It's a staircase pitch. Okay.
Okay. Got more time.
Yeah. Except for you get out of breath. You can't use big words. Okay, here we go. We have a problem, and a big one. Climate change is wreaking havoc with our weather. It's causing severe storms, flood, and drought, and a new kind of refugee that's escaping these kind of disasters. And the problem is getting bigger. It's bigger than you think. The world is making progress, as you know, on our emissions, reduction of emissions of greenhouse gases. That's good news. But there's already so much carbon in the atmosphere, more than we've had for millions of years. So that even though we will be curbing emissions, the world will continue to get hotter and more intolerable despite reduced emissions. So to avoid disaster, we have to figure out how to remove carbon from the atmosphere along with reducing emissions. Fortunately, scientists and businesses are working hard on this, and we have hundreds of businesses that are scaling or working on scaling approaches. Some of them accelerate natural processes to do this, and some of them are chemical inventions of new ways of doing it. Here in the Upper Valley, where we live, Upper Valley is part Vermont and part New Hampshire, we need to figure out how ways to help remove carbon as well. Two ideas are that we could take one idea. The first idea is to work with our farmers and small businesses to figure out how to help the farmers use biochar to grow things better and store carbon, as well as increase their productivity. The second idea is to help us address a big problem we have up here with affordable housing. We could incent government and construction companies to use a new kind of cement that sequesters carbon without compromising strength. I'd love to tell you more. I'd love to figure out how we can learn together and figure out how to take action together.
All right. Very nice. I knew you'd be good. You are good.
Yeah, but I have this woman in my corner, in my ear, that's saying, no, my husband's a scientist. It's all a bunch of bunk. So
yeah. Well, yeah, you'll have lots of naysayers. But you know, I think the way to look at it is you're not going to get everybody. Typically, the people you approach, in general, a third are never going to be convinced because their identity is just tied up with something that's completely irrational and lacks any humanity at all. I mean, it's just shut down. And there's another third that are going to be behind you already. It's the people in the middle that we need. So don't try to convince the unconvincible. Just work on the people in the middle. That's the target audience, really. If we could get to 66%, that would be a huge win. And so I think you can relax a little bit about this because you're never going to get everybody. I mean, and if you try too hard, you'll make yourself tense. Mm-hmm. And when you make yourself tense, your voice freezes up into just a few notes and into a regular cadence. And so the best way to make a human connection in that 90 seconds is to get as relaxed as you possibly can and speak with the person and not at them, and just speak from the heart and don't worry about every word or every idea that you would wish you could convey in that amount of time. I think the best way to warm up to that is to imagine you're talking with about a 7-year-old across the dinner table, and take that 90 seconds to that 7-year-old. What would your tone, your cadence be in that situation? And then let's see if we can take that to a more challenging moment where all of your instincts are going to be to give up the way you would naturally talk to somebody, the way you would naturally talk to a 7-year-old. Because although you would never talk to a big adult audience as if they were 7, there's no chance you're ever going to do that. The situation is going to pull you toward that audience. But if your starting point is a 7-year-old, it tends to come off much better. So what I'd like you to do, if you would be willing, Judy, is just back up and just give me the 7-year-old version of that 90 seconds. You're not reading it, just straight from the heart.
Yeah, I'm going to take it off my screen.
Yeah, take it off your screen and just look at that 7-year-old and give that 7-year-old your best understanding of what the problem is fundamentally and what you're trying to do about it.
I'll take a 9-year-old. I have a 7 and a 9-year-old grandchild. And the
I'll go with that.
7-year-old is sort of not yet rational. He's
Yeah,
more
okay.
fanciful. The 9-year-old, I gave her the spiel yesterday.
Good.
And she understood it.
All
They
right.
understood it. And she said, that's fine. That is a good job. So
You passed the test.
I passed the test. Okay.
Well, tell us what you told her.
Okay, Indy. We have a problem, and it's a big one. Climate change is causing all sorts of weather disasters. We're getting stronger storms, bigger flooding, terrible droughts, and a whole new kind of refugee in this world that's trying to escape all these things. And this problem is worse than you thought. It's getting worse because we have too much carbon as well. We are working well on reducing emissions. So you may have heard about the international pledge that the world has made to reduce emissions, and that we're doing pretty darn well on that progress. We may even reach that by 2040 or 2050. But things are not going to be okay just because we reach that. In fact, the world will still be intolerable because now we have more carbon today than we've had for millions of years in our atmosphere. And that carbon is making the world intolerable. It will continue to be too hot, and so hot for all of us, especially you, Indira, and your kids. So we need to figure out what to do about this besides reducing emissions. Luckily, scientists like your dad and businesses like your grandpa are working on things that will capture carbon and store it permanently. They're using various natural processes that have existed for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and trying to speed them up. And they're using other chemical processes to do this as well. Here in the Upper Valley, we'd like to figure out some ways to contribute to this. One idea is to use businesses to create something called biochar that our farmers, our many farmers in Vermont and New Hampshire, can use, put on their soil to store carbon and at the same time increase their productivity. That means growing more with the same amount of land. Another idea is figuring out how we can address our affordable housing problem that we're all working on in the Upper Valley. In fact, we have the Habitat for Humanity just announced that it's starting up a new effort to build low-income housing. And we could incent those that are building it, the governments that are funding it, as well as the construction companies, to use a new kind of cement that actually stores carbon in it permanently without becoming any weaker as cement. So I'd love to talk more to you and your friends about carbon removal and figure out how we all can do something to help address this in the Upper Valley.
That's lovely. Lovely. See, what happens when you do that is you become much more yourself. And honestly, it didn't feel like you were talking down to me as an adult. It just came across as, okay, I know who you are, and I'm sort of, I trust you more even in 90 seconds because your voice is congruent with the topic. And the topic is obviously coming straight from the heart. And that heart is where the connection is. Your heart's connecting to mine. The logic of it is simple enough. It's logical, it's rational, it's pretty obvious. I didn't know those two solutions existed because they haven't been talked about that much. So that's news. And I'm glad to hear them because you make me really nervous when you talk about how bad things are and are going to be. So it's a nice story flow. And the voice, the second time, I think is a lot better than the first. But let me open it up to the others because you were all watching, Peter and Evan, Chris. What's your take on it? Because it's not just what I think, it's what you all think. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that is really, really key is that the energy level. So it's very clear that you're talking at with and at a person. And there's an energy level to it that is way different from somebody who just is told, tell me what carbon removal is. You know what I mean? So I think you carry the message with a sense of kind of urgency and upbeatness that is inviting. And and you covered a lot of ground in a relatively short period of time in terms of, I love that you give examples. You linked it to dad and grandpa, and then you kept talking about where you actually live. So those were a few things that sort of stood out at me in terms of how it was effective. But yeah, very well
Good.
done.
Yeah, those are good observations. How about you, Peter?
I had just one thought. I agree with everything Chris said. One thing that you did between the first one and the second one was you kind of toned down that first introduction. In the first one, I had a reaction like, oh man, she's yelling at me, like it was the amplitude was a little too much. And that might have filtered, for somebody that might not know you, that might get a negative reaction right off the bat. And so the second time you were more engaging and inviting, I thought, in that first statement, the first thing that you start with. So thanks, Bob. Carl had his hand up too.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Bob, Chris, and Peter have said so far. And I actually started writing this down, but I'll say it verbally that I noticed this just might seem like a minor thing, but in your first run, you had a phrase, something about and avoid disaster. And I was writing down, perhaps you could go for a more positive, how about, guess what? We can actually restore the climate, or, we could clean up this mess that we've made. We know how to do it, or, and because I guess I've become particularly sensitized to people that say things like, and therefore we could avoid the worst outcomes.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, yeah, let me go avoid worst outcomes. I'm excited. Right. So I think it was great, frankly, that I didn't hear avoid disaster in your second run.
It's a little, yeah. So yeah, I think everybody is sort of on the same page that it comes across better the second time. And I've never seen that approach not work. Anytime I've said to somebody, how about a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old? What happens is your tone changes to a more affectionate tone naturally, because you don't, if you're going to hold a kid's attention, you're going to have to do that, and you're going to have to be more inviting, and you're going to have to be more expressive. And I thought you did a really great job. Here's why it's a better job. Your voice, your tone is absolutely key to authenticity.
Yeah.
The tone of your voice has to match the words. It has to be congruent. And every vowel sound in your words is a connection point with another human being. We connect through the vowels. Those vowels are notes, as if you were playing music. And as you know, notes by themselves can make you feel very different things. We are attuned to hearing notes a certain way. And so when you're relaxed, your voice tends to hit the right note. And if you're trying hard to stay connected to a person, which you do when you're talking to a kid, you tend to even work harder at getting that tone right, regardless of what you're saying, because you instinctively know what those notes are. You don't have to think about it. Mm-hmm. So what really worked is that every word you had in that 90 seconds was said slowly enough so I could hear the vowels. And the vowels all had the right tone, the right note. And you did that without thinking. You did it with the intent. You knew what you were intending to do. And the problem is, once you get with an audience that you think is about to jump on you with negativity, is you tend to freeze up and just go to one or two notes, because that feels safer to you. And your first pitch had a lot of that monotone to it, and it was said very quickly. So the tone, sometimes the notes were off, and other times you couldn't hear the notes because you ran over it. Mm-hmm. And that's our problem. How do you go to the legislature where people are in a hurry? They don't really want to give you the time of day. They already think they know everything, or they already hate the word climate. And how do you not freeze in their presence? And I think the way to do that is to continue to practice talking to a young person, and warm up before you even get to the legislature or whatever the talk is, and warm up by doing scales with your voice. Just
really?
start, yeah, absolutely. The same way a singer would do before they went on stage, because there's absolutely no difference between singing and talking, other than the kind of the way you stretch out the notes. You have, the human voice has 3 full octaves. That's a lot of notes in that voice. And for whatever reason, from the time we went to school, teachers kind of set a norm for us of 4 to 6 notes. They talked 4 to 6 notes for the most part, except the ones you remember as being very good. And they rewarded people who talked in 4 to 6 notes. And the higher up you went, and especially if it's science or math, the fewer notes you got to use. And now it's a habit. So all of us are habituated to some extent to use only 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. And when you're only using 1, 2, 3, 4 notes and you're really tense, you tend to repeat the rhythm of it. So now what you get is, I'm here to talk to you about climate. I think the world is getting to a place where there's more problem, da 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 da. Not only is it repetitive, it finishes each point with a high note, which sounds like a question. And if you're trying to make a point, it can't come off as a question. No, we have a problem. Now, what most people will say, particularly in the university environment these days, is we have a problem, and it's called climate change. And my name is Bob Sadler. And if I'm listening to that, I want to say, well, is your name that or isn't it? Is there a problem or isn't there? People don't, because you're now so acclimated to it.
Yeah.
Now, you didn't do that, I must say. It was wonderful.
So, Evan, you're going to talk to legislators. How do you translate, when you go to a legislator, you do have to be convincing and sincere, but do you take this, I gotta pretend I'm talking to a 7-year-old? Do you say, yeah, I can't use that? What do you think?
So I was actually the first one. I was a little bit nervous, but I kind of just go into it with, I expect that they don't really know anything about carbon dioxide removal, and so it's I just try to give them as like low level, or a broad level of what the technology is and what CDR, give them an overview of the problem, and then an overview of the bill, but like on a really broad level, and then let them ask questions, kind of like, because I don't really know what's piquing their interest or what they want more information about. So I kind of just give them the broad overview, and then let them ask for more details, and then try to give it to them as they ask for it,
I think that's
sounding
absolutely right. Don't give people more detail than they need. Some of them already have the details. Some of them aren't going to bother with it. And some are going to be genuinely curious, and you can go very deep with them. But I would give them enough to prompt a question.
Yeah.
I actually lobbied for a whole bill without a lobbyist license once. Fortunately, most of the legislators were male, and so I just hung out in the men's room and went to the urinal next to them each time, and I lobbied a whole bill through that way. It took me a week.
Drank a lot of water, huh?
I drank a lot of water. Well, they don't know what you're doing. And you have there, because they're older, you've got about 35 seconds. But I actually did get the bill through that way. So I think even in that quick time, it's possible. But I think here's something you could do with your voice, Judy. It's really good. So this is a small thing, but you can change your volume often. So there are several things you can change, and you can change them any way you want, like any moment you want. You can change the volume, you can change the speed as well, and you can also punctuate with your hands and arms. It's like, even on Zoom, if I want to make a point, I can bring my hands up and push the point outward. And what it does is, even though it doesn't have a lot of impact on Zoom or on video, it changes your voice. It gives your voice a physical jolt. So here's the point, right? So if something I really want to say, I use my hands and say it and leave a pause after it. We are cooking. It's gotten so hot. It's a full body experience, but it changes your voice, which is why even on video, I like to use gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Because the gesture colors your voice with physically.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your tone was really nice. You got the right notes, but it was all one volume.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just take like 3 or 4 sentences, more or less. You don't have to get it exactly like you did last time, but go back to the 9-year-old and go, oh, we have a problem. And just give me about 2 or 3 sentences.
Okay.
You can start anywhere.
Okay. We have a problem, and it's a big one. We have so many problems in our weather right now. We have terrible storms. We have flooding. We have even the opposite of that. We have drought. And then we have people, refugees, that are running away from these disasters because their homes are being destroyed.
Yeah, nice. Now, when you went to your homes are being destroyed, your voice came way down. Every time your voice changes, it pulls the attention of the listener back in. Every time you change the speed, every time you change the volume. So let's go back to the beginning of that more or less again and start it again. Only let's change every phrase, change the volume of each phrase. It's going to be hard for you to think about it. So you just start and I'll guide you if I can.
Okay. We have a problem.
Now go to a loud whisper.
And it's a big one.
Stay with that.
The weather is changing all over the world. We're having droughts.
Now march up with each new crisis with
droughts and flooding and what else are we having?
Yeah, that'll do. We've got droughts. We've got overheating. We've got flooding. Yeah. Now, let it pause. Rest a minute. Take a breath.
And we have people.
And now I go right back to a really soft voice again.
Okay.
And
we even have a new kind of refugee.
Even more of a whisper, a loud whisper. And we've got
refugees that are actually moving away because of these disasters.
That's it. And let that pause. That's even more powerful. So now, in the natural course of things, you would do that, but it's just hard to do it under pressure.
Yeah.
However, the more you rehearse it, the more it becomes second nature. Now, there are things that we do that have become habits, like talking in one volume, that would be very hard to use that tool of volume if you didn't do it every day. So the thing to do is to practice it with everybody you talk with all day long. Because until it becomes a habit, it's almost impossible to conjure up in a particular situation. I've probably worked with 2,000 executives now, and I'm still getting calls from them in retirement asking how I'm doing and just saying, I got to tell you that that workshop just changed my life. And I say, well, I don't understand what you mean. They said, well, in order to do that, you have to do that at home too. I mean, you can't just do that as an executive at work. You've got to, you have to habituate all that. He said, and taking that home with my wife and kids, or my spouse and kids, or my relatives or my friends, it changed my relationship with them. Because the connection is that much different. And so many people who have been habituated into 2 or 3 notes and repetitive are taking that home and using it with family and friends without realizing it, and have been for 10 or 20 or 30 years in some cases. And when they make that switch and make it a daily practice, it changes everything. I mean, people just relate to them differently. And that's the feedback I'm continuing to get. So I think doing this with a change in volume every sentence almost, and understand that just as in music, if you take the notes and volume up, you inspire. If you take the notes and volume and march it down, you frighten and depress. Go down the scale and it's depressing. Go up the scale and it's lifting. And that's volume as well as notes. So we have floods, we've got droughts, we've got whole continents. And I can go up, or I can go, whichever way I go, I'm going to get a lot more attention from the listener.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost doesn't matter. But if I go down, I will depress.
So Tina had a comment, and I have a 20-minute presentation. Which is of course, it's on the same topic, but it's very different. So I don't know, maybe Tina can have her.
Yeah, go right ahead, Tina.
I was just going to ask a real short question, because this is something I always struggle with. Where's the fine line between still being authentic and being animated? But something you just said, Bob, I want to specifically ask about the high and the low. Is it the same for both genders? Don't women who high come across as shrill?
Oh, if you talk that way all the time, the warm up, I think it's really helpful to do. If you put your finger on your Adam's apple, your voice is an instrument. This is the reed inside your Adam's apple, and your Adam's apple goes up and down to control the notes. What women's voices are, in some cultures anyway, they tend to be an octave higher anyway. And if they use high notes a lot, their Adam's apple is up and it sounds tense. So not only is the high note high, it's also tense. And if you stay there, it's grating like a fingernail on a blackboard. It's why women get charged with that more often. But if you have a full range from your Adam's apple down to your Adam's apple up, you're getting the volume from your chest at some moments, the intensity of a high note, and that you can also talk in a mid register. Evan talks in a mid register, and so Evan, what would really help you is to vary the notes. Some women are really high, and what would really help them is to vary their notes to high and low. So if all of us, just for a moment, put your try to find your Adam's apple. It's probably higher on women generally than men. Men, if you see it protrude, and it tends to be a little lower. And just say the note all together now. Just say E, E, E. You feel your Adam's apple go up. E, E. Yeah, and that's what women get accused of, is being up there all the time. But go down with and now your Adam's apple goes down to say So you go and your Adam's apple just goes right up the ladder, but it's fully capable of that whole range. And if you're speaking with your full capability, not your habit, at your full capability, you're never going to get accused of being shrill or monotone, because your tone is varying all over the place.
Okay, thanks.
So I think that's the answer to that. And so, Judy, we'll do your 20 minutes. We may not do all 20, because what I would love to have today be about mostly is voice. So I'd let you go maybe 7 or 8 minutes, and then I try to do the next 7 or 8 minutes with some changes in tone. And I'm not worried about getting through the whole storyline as much as I'm worried about getting as much as we can about voice. Because as I listen to your to OpenAir's video recordings online or video presentations, almost everybody is talking too fast, and almost everybody is in a repetitive rhythm. And you're losing interest on those two characteristics. Those are habits. They're not who you are, that's who you've become. Every human being has a full range of voice, has a full range of volume, almost, unless you have a disability, you have a full range of voice, full volume, and you can talk faster, you can talk slow. There's nothing that isn't authentic about that. It's just habit, that whatever culture you were in, whatever experience you were in, is going to make you do things that don't connect as well. So if you really are making a living talking, or this is the most important thing to you, it wouldn't hurt to go to voice lessons, the same as a musical person does. And if you want to see what I'm talking about in more detail, take a look at Roger Love. There's a video, probably YouTube, but if you just type in Roger Love, Harvard, there's an hour-long talk he did at Harvard, which I think is brilliant. And he goes into this in much greater detail with Harvard students, trying to keep them from doing these ineffective things. And he actually gets some people up on stage, and he's a professional voice coach, so he makes a living doing that. And what you can see him do is really brilliant, and you can use. So, Judy, why don't you go ahead and start your 20 minutes, and then don't forgive me if I stop you, because we want to try to make some points on voice.
Okay, let me share my screen. So, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, let me go into slideshow. Can you still see it?
I can.
Okay, I can't see you guys anymore. Oh, yes, I can. I have 2 different screens. So let me give you the context for this. I'm going to be speaking.
Judy, I'm sorry, you're in presenter mode, I think. So we're not seeing one single slide.
Yeah, you might hit swap displays in the upper left, possibly.
Oh, okay. Where is that? Is
upper
that
left?
Upper left of
Just
what?
a little more of the screen. You're really close to it now.
Oh,
Right next
Oh.
to it.
There we go.
There you go.
okay. So now I can see Bob. I don't want to see Bob. I'd hide him. Okay, so you whoop. Okay, so I'm going to be giving this at a variety of little community settings. The first one is going to be at my church. So, and it's our climate group. So, my dog is hearing my voice, and so he's getting excited. So he might wander in. Okay.
We can't hear him.
Okay, not yet. Okay. Thanks. Oh dear, it shows me my notes. I'll have to make sure I don't look at them. Thank you very much for coming this morning to our second hour I'm going to be talking to you about a topic that may be new to you, and it's called carbon dioxide removal. I wanted to give a little bit of background for you about where I'm coming from regarding climate change. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm a mom. I'm a working woman. I didn't even become a climate person when I retired. Now, I did go to Earth Day in 1990 in LA, and I saw Peter, Paul, and Mary. That was about the extent of my environmental action. I didn't even read the famous book by Rachel Carson. I did notice that there were plenty of natural disasters, and they seem to be increasing. There was incredible flooding in Asia. There were incredible fires, even Los Angeles. And the drought in Africa, where I did lots of my work, was getting worse and worse, especially around Ethiopia and northern Kenya. I did listen and watch Al Gore's speech, his movie called An Inconvenient Truth. You may have seen it too. And he did try to wake us up, and he tried to do it very well. He got a Nobel Prize for it. And most of what he was saying was right, but it still didn't make me move beyond recycling, although I did add composting. Then I heard about the Paris Agreement, which you may have heard of as well. It's 2015. We had a global commitment to net zero emissions. That was a big deal, and we did it. It made me very happy that our leaders were taking care of everything for us. Then I got introduced via Zoom, actually via Skype, to this nice guy named Dennis. I was working on something else regarding Africa, but this guy was passionate, and he said, Judy, read this book. And so here's the book that changed my mind and got my attention. Climate Restoration. You can get it. You can borrow it from me. You don't have to read much. You can just read the first 50 pages and get the gist of it. Dennis said to me, Judy, read this, and I'm telling you, wipe your slate clean. Stop doing anything else. You need to work on this in order to make the world good for our grandkids. And I believed him, and I'm still working on that, or I'm beginning to work on it at least. So the net zero pledge by 2050 means that the accumulation of greenhouse gases is going to stop by then. Well, or almost stop. We're not going to be able to stop emissions from certain industries that fast. Like transport is a really big one. That's going to continue to emit some. But overall, greenhouse gas emissions may stop or very slow down by 2040. That's really good news. Now, the problem is that net zero does not address all the carbon that is accumulated in the atmosphere. Now, here's my only slide with a graph, but I think it helps. You can see there's a line across the middle of the graph that shows that for thousands of years, carbon in the atmosphere hasn't really been a big deal. But in the last, 200 years, and in the last 20 years, the level of carbon in the atmosphere has soared, and it continues to go up.
All right now. So let me just interrupt for a second. When you start this slide, Judy, try going to a loud whisper.
Okay. So this is the only slide I'm going to use. Slides can be confusing. This one you can see shows that levels of carbon in the atmosphere have been low for a very long time, all the way to about 200 years ago. And in the last 200 years, the level has risen. And in the last 40 years, it's really risen, so that we're already up to 422 parts per million.
Okay, now as you get to the end of that point, take the volume up gradually as you're talking. So go back to, this is my only slide. And then when you start that climb in the graph, take your volume up with it.
Okay. So this is my only graph.
This is my only slide. Tell us a secret. This is my only slide.
It's my only graph. I have plenty of slides.
All right, sorry.
This is my only graph. And it's a pretty simple one. You can see the horizontal line. That's the level of carbon in our atmosphere. It's been roughly the same for hundreds and hundreds of years. In fact, for millions of years. But around 1750, it started climbing. And it's been climbing ever since. And in fact, in the last 40 years, it's climbed astronomically.
Astronomical. Now take it way up.
We're up to 422 parts per million. That is so high, something that we haven't reached for hundreds and hundreds of years. And we think we're going to reach 500 parts per million by 2050 unless we address carbon removal.
That's nice. Now pause for 3 or 4 seconds before you start again. Good.
So in short, we have to have a twofold approach to our climate restoration. One is reducing emissions, as I've talked about. And the second is removing carbon.
Yeah. Now I would go back to that whisper. And the second one, which a lot of people don't know about, it's just you and me right now.
It's just us.
Yeah.
Is removing carbon from the atmosphere.
There you go.
Now, this illustration might make it a little clearer. It's a bathtub and it's full of carbon. And those little lines up there are the carbon that is dribbling out of our world into the atmosphere. We're going to turn that off by 2040 or 2050. But the level of carbon in that bathtub is going to continue to go up because we can't turn everything off. What we really need is a drain in order to keep the carbon from overflowing or from getting any higher. So that little drain, which is expertly drawn on the right-hand side, is the carbon dioxide removal. So in short, climate restoration includes reducing carbon emissions, which is what we're doing, what our Paris Accord is about. And the new part that we're adding is removing carbon from the atmosphere. That's the topic of my presentation today, the one I want to help you understand a bit better. So here's a standard definition, probably far too many words, but you may hear CDR, which refers to carbon dioxide removal. And that means a whole range of activities that are used to pull carbon from the atmosphere and durably store it in a variety of ways, in the ground, in rocks, even in the ocean, and sometimes in products. CDR is not carbon offsets. You may have heard of carbon offsets, where companies that emit carbon and other greenhouse gases, they buy carbon offsets or they plant trees to allow them to continue to emit gases. That's not what we're talking about here. And we're not talking about something sort of similar, which is carbon capture and storage. That means taking a company that's emitting lots of carbon, see from these towers here, and then stores it somehow. So they're not stopping their emissions. They're just figuring out how to capture it and store it. So they're not reducing the carbon in the atmosphere at all. So that's not what we're talking about. Now, here's a brief list of the different ways that carbon dioxide is removed. I'm no scientist. I can't really explain this, but I do have lots of books and articles that can explain it, and you may be able to learn about which of them seems most palatable or feasible or attractive for you. They're all described in the CDR primer, and they fall into 4 categories that are listed here. My favorite example right now is one that actually combines 3 different steps. It was actually put together in a competition by Four Corners Carbon Coalition, and they're in 4 states in the Southwest. They put a competition together saying, show us how we can remove carbon. And 3 companies came together. One, direct air capture. So they're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. The next company processed that carbon, and that's the center box. And the third put that carbon into concrete in a concrete plant and created blocks. Actually, that's the fourth guy down here that can be used to build things. Now, in this competition, it actually is really relevant for the Upper Valley because we just had Habitat for Humanity announce a new multi-story low-income housing project that's starting this fall. And in this competition, they actually built 100 starter homes with Habitat for Humanity using these low carbon concrete blocks that actually store carbon. So that's sort of an interesting example for me that shows how this can work and how it might work well in the Upper Valley.
All right, so Judy, you're on a really good track here. I'm watching the time.
Yeah.
And
that's fine.
I think we've got a good sense of how you're approaching this and how you're approaching your audience and what you sound like, and I really like it. I think what I would suggest is continue to work on varying the volume of your voice, and if you can do that with ease day after day, it will happen with ease when you do the presentation. And I think it makes a huge difference for you. But I like it. I mean, I like everything about it, actually, and would love to hear the whole thing and love to see it in a church setting or anywhere else. But what I wanted to do is to check in with everyone else while we have just a couple minutes left, and just review the points from today. I've done a slide deck with, and I've added in some of the points that I wanted to make today in the process of working with you. But any thoughts or questions from the rest of you, or comments on Judy's presentation? Maybe Carl? No, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Max.
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the thing that I noticed was that aside from any sort of voice modulation or inflections, you clearly rehearsed the presentation. Like it was clearly practiced, and that you're not just kind of winging it. So that's the thing that I noticed. You clearly thought ahead about what you were going to say when you stuttered a bit, but I don't think that was out of lack of preparation. So I think that especially was very noticeable.
Yeah, thanks. And even something where you misspeak or stutter a bit, I think only makes you more human. I mean, I you know, why would we worry about that? So much about, and when you start with the slides you started with, it humanizes you immediately. And so we're not expecting perfection. We've got a human being here, but we're connecting to you, and that's what really matters. So yeah, it obviously is rehearsed, and that's good. You were prepared, but it doesn't sound like you're reading it, or that it doesn't sound like you're even reading your notes, which I think is a good thing.
One question, I'm not a scientist, and I have trouble explaining those 4 approaches. And so I hesitated to putting them there, but I figure people are going to say, well, what do you mean? How do you do this stuff?
Yeah.
So I tried to show them, but didn't try to go into them. Should I have gone in a bit deeper? I know, no, it's okay.
You don't have time in 20 minutes to do that. If you can even give them a sense of, I think all you're going to do is give them a sense that there's a lot of ways to do this and a lot of people trying, and money and attention will really help. And if they want to know deeper, here's where you go.
Yeah. So Peter, you can see that I used some of your slides. Do you have any comments on those? You can see one slide, I actually dropped out the third option, beyond, you had 3, you had one on like sun reflecting off the
Yeah.
ground, and I thought, I can't explain that. I'm just going to drop that one.
Yeah.
So
Mike has his hand up. I do have
Okay.
something to say, but I'll
Okay.
go after Mike.
Okay, Mike.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to second some things that Carl had put in the chat, and in particular, using the language of cleaning up our mess. It's really dead simple language, and people respond to that. We have made a giant carbon spill in the sky, and we should clean it up. It's just
Nice.
the most
I
basic,
love-
simple principle.
I love the metaphors. You know, those, anything you can do like that makes this whole thing work so much.
What do you think about the bathtub?
I love the bathtub. I would use the bathtub myself if I was doing the presentation. It's just, you know, it's one you're not going to see anywhere else. I love the imperfection of it, the little drawing. You know, that's just fine, you know. It pulls people in.
I agree. Actually, there are lots of bathtub photos around, or bathtub images that have been created, and they're all too complicated. Yours is nice and simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a connoisseur of all the different bathtub.
So one, this comment, Judy, is not about any of the slides that might have come from me. This is about the one that you did about the 4 corners. And I was with you, but to me, you missed an opportunity on that slide to bring it home. Like, imagine this. We're taking carbon out of the atmosphere at the same time building affordable housing. You know, something about that is just, so the opportunity is there to just go, pow, kazam, you know, wow, you know, and you don't, I didn't feel the magic that I knew, I knew is there. So bring me the magic next time.
Great.
Good. That's so relevant for up here. We have so much problem. And Habitat for Humanity is indeed, they just announced a multi-household building.
Great. Other comments? Well, I think we were trying to keep it to an hour today, and I just wanted to say it was a great job, Judy. It was nice working with you.
Good. I appreciate it, and I appreciate Tina saying do it. And now I'm going to actually schedule it. I'm going to do it, and I've got, I think, 2 or 3 places I'm going to schedule and see how it goes.
Oh, it will go well.